Hello and welcome to the Smart to Noise Ratio Pro Audio Podcast. Here are your hosts John Dayton and Anthony Kosobucki with special guest Brandon Kapral and Steve Kowalcyk.
All right. Thank you, Heather, for that lovely introduction. Welcome, everyone, to the Smart to Noise Ratio Pro Audio Podcast. That's right. We got a full house. Myself, John Dayton, the host. You know me. You know Anthony Kosobucki. We're the two schmoes that are here every week. Come rain, come shine, come whatever.
Snowstorm.
Joining us this week, the first gent you heard introduced is Brandon Kapral.
How's it going?
He is, we're starting, it's going to be kind of hopefully a drum show, but our two guests are both drummers and sound guys. So Brandon's the drummer in Anthony's band. I had met him last summer at a gig, so sort of knew of him. But he did a fill-in gig for us when we were fresh out of drummers at the church where I work a couple weeks ago. And he also works for a couple of different sound companies. So when we get to his portion of the thing, we'll find out how he got his experience and education and job and all that stuff. And then coming in via Facebook video chat, where he can see us, but we can't actually see him, because I am not the master of my domain tonight. We have my buddy, a longtime rock and roll partner, lighting guy, drummer in a number of bands that I've mixed, Steve Kowalcyk.
How we doing?
Nice. So hopefully, I couldn't figure out how to get Steve's audio internally into the session, and he can only hear Brandon and Anthony through their mics. So I'm actually thinking back to the last time I did this. I think I actually used a second computer for the Skype connection and busted in. But for right now, I just have a trusty SM57 dangling over the screen of my computer pointed at the internal speakers, and that seems to be working all right. Sorry about the fan noise. Well, anyway, let's get right into it. We had an idea for a little bit of a special segment. I don't know. Did you come up with anything? Any new gear you're excited about this week, Anth?
The Chandler stuff.
Yeah.
Jerk.
Do you want to elaborate why you're so excited about gear?
I just got the availability to use the nicest studio in Buffalo as a spot to freelance out of a GCR audio. So they've got a plethora of gear that I might kill someone over. And they said I could use it anytime they're not already booked. So I'm pretty excited to get into all that stuff and then maybe eventually mix and master, or one of the two, for the record me and Brandon are doing right now over there. Nice.
So my little contribution to the gear spot this week is I was going to talk about how they just updated the C1000, but I never liked C1000. So if you like it, go look that up.
What did they do to it?
I don't know.
I have a pair.
I don't know if they made it not suck or. I forget. I read about it somewhere, and I was like, oh, I know a lot of guys like those, so I'll mention that they're starting to make a new improved version of them. I don't know if it had something to do
with the grill not popping off.
That'd be nice, right?
And it's impossible to put back on once it pops off.
Right. Even more impossible than an SM57.
Yeah. At least you can replace those.
Yeah. Yeah. The thing about a 57 grill, if it comes off, is that little copper retaining clip.
Oh, yeah.
Those are impossible to come by. Like, yeah. I've called Shure, and they're like, nope. Sorry, dude.
It'll cost you $5 less than the entire microphone. Just buy a new one.
So that means you scope out local indie bands and just steal theirs.
Just replace. Yeah. Oh, it was an accident.
Sorry. The other thing I'm super excited about is we just finally got our in-ear system updated at work. We had originally 8 channels of Sennheiser. I think it was even pre-G series. It was like
they were G1s.
G1s, yeah.
Like the EW 100 series.
Yep. So bare bones, 10-year-old, falling apart, ran on 9-volt batteries. Those all went out. We took them out back and went Office Space on those puppies.
That I still have one. I can't get it to die. I've got one Sennheiser G1 EW 100 handheld microphone. Still runs on 9 volts. That thing won't die. All the other ones I've got to ship out at least once a year to get tuned up and stuff. This thing runs like a champ.
Now that you said that, it's over.
That's fine. That's okay. I want the new fancy one with the little antenna on the bottom.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
So that was the thing that that swung me over, is just how long those the first set of Sennheisers lasted. Because Shure stuff, I don't think would have necessarily held up for 10 years, getting the use that it's got.
The Germans are used to having to live through hard times for very long
engineering.
periods of time. So,
but yeah, the metal cases on the belt packs helped, and the design really helped. And I'm a dyed-in-the-wool Shure man, but I'm in love with Sennheiser radio equipment.
Well, the 10-year-old Shures would have lasted 10 years, but the new ones won't. Yeah. The old PSM 600s you could run over with a tour van and nothing would happen to them.
Actually, I dropped my 700s out of the back of my car.
Yeah, and it probably still worked. I mean, the old metal cases, and then they started updating them and trying to make them more commercially available to the end user, and they were just not okay.
Mine was 700 band.
Illegal now.
Yep.
Yeah.
But anyway, like I've always loved the Shure mics, but I've noticed more issues with the radios. Like intermod is more common. The squelch is weird on Shure stuff, and my Sennheisers are just, the new ones especially, are just dead quiet and they work all the time.
I'm sure your musicians enjoy that.
Oh, they're in ecstasy down there, and shortly I'm going to be able to give them stereo mixes. But anyway, not to leave our guests too much out in the cold. You still with us, Steve?
Yep.
All right, cool. We'll be getting to you shortly.
He was able to get down 3 more beers in the last 5 minutes.
That's right. Yeah, you're the only one of us that can partake because we're all inside of a Wesleyan church right now, and that's sort of frowned upon in this denomination. It's not one of those churches where you can have beer at the reception in the fellowship hall. But anyway, enough about gear, because I have a feeling we're gonna get into it here and spend quite a good while on stuff. Just to make you a little bit more familiar with our guests. Man, never mind. I'm going to stop looking at the session. It's working. I'm just, whatever. I'm going to let it go.
Wait, what's that? Oh.
Quit it. Quit it. We're going to do great this one because there's not a TV in the room. You're going to be able to pull through, bud? With no moving pictures?
See, that's the problem. If we did it at my house and I put a hockey on to distract us and not pay attention to it, he'd be lost.
He'd be glued to it?
Yeah.
Well, is there any baseball on, or is that...
No, it's too.
Oh, it was on ESPN Classic. See, but there's not even a TV in the room, and we're distracted by it. This is what a mess we are. But anyway, I want to get Brandon on the line next, and then we'll kick it over to Steve. But Brandon, I didn't prep you for any of this, but if you could give us the 4 minutes or less story of how you got interested in audio, like if there was one magic moment that made you know that was what you wanted to do, and a little bit about your education and career path.
Sure. I have been a drummer since I was a wee tyke, and joined bands all throughout, being a teenager. And then I got into theater production in high school. Through the music side of it, I was in the pit orchestra for a musical, and they said, hey, our sound guy is not going to be here. You can do it. And I said, I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'll learn. And then years and years of working for local companies. I still work for one that I started working for 11 years ago. I will spit the name out here. It's called Pro Audio Consulting, and we're a small to medium-sized company. We have medium-sized line array and that kind of thing. But we the thing I love about that company, and I've worked for a couple of others, and I still do. The thing I love about Pro Audio Consulting is that it's small, and I started there a long time ago. So I'm one of the top engineers. I have a lot of say in gear purchase, and I also have a lot of say in, who we bring on, which is great. The thing I love the most about that company, and probably the reason I'm still doing audio, is we're all there to get the job done. We're all there as friends, and no one's ever going to ridicule anyone for asking a question, which I think is kind of overlooked anymore. I think a lot of people, John's great with it, with my limited experience seeing him with his interns here. I don't know if they would even know what a fader is, but if he had a problem, or if they had a problem, they could ask John, and he wouldn't even think about belittling them or talking down to them about it. And that's the way my company is.
It's not until you reach the inner circle.
You've never met Kevin.
You're right.
We used to all but beat that poor kid.
That kid got to mix on way better stuff than us all the time, though.
Well, anyway, the reason I'm still doing it is because of Pro Audio, because those guys are so accepting and willing to teach me. I basically learned what I know from doing it, from being in the field and making the mistakes, and I've done sound for like a lot of us here, for all kinds of very eclectic things, all the way from business meetings, corporate meetings, to, full on Christian hardcore festivals every year, which are my favorite shows of the year. But because I got into pro audio, I've kind of digressed here, but because I got into working with pro audio consulting, I realized I really loved the field. I got lucky and got an internship in a studio in Manhattan when I was 20, I guess. And I was there for about a year and a half. I slept on their futon, and I played with a Neve Capricorn digital desk for that long, which, if you've never seen, I recommend go Google it. It's gigantic. It's impossible to use. It's really just a monster, and that's why you've probably never heard of or seen it, because there were only like 12 of them, I think, ever made. They cost an arm and a leg when they were first made, and they were not flexible or easy to use whatsoever. However, when things did work, it was a beautiful desk to use. After that, I moved across country. Then I kind of focused more on the music side of things for a few years, and I lived in San Francisco and played with a band for a couple of years. Moved back here, got really big back into pro audio consulting, realized that I really want to do audio, and to make the long story short, I now am in school for electrical engineering because I want to build gear, build and repair my own, and basically learn why audio is the way it is. And I think electrical engineering is a good way to go with that. So, and now here I am.
Sweet.
Yeah.
All right, you still with us there, Stevis?
Yep, I'm still there.
Awesome. All right, now the only thing standing between us and talking about drums is your life story. So
I'll keep it nice and sweet.
yeah, brother Brandon brought us in just a hair under 4 minutes. So take it, Steve.
Okay, basically, I started playing drums in a couple of local bands here and there. It's where I actually met John. He was doing sound for a lot of these bands. And I actually ended up, my first band, I bought a couple lights to kind of make a little more of a show out of our band. Then I started getting more phone calls for my band to play shows just because we had a lighting rig. And then the band kind of broke up, and I was still getting phone calls to bring the lighting rig. So I got really heavy into doing lighting that way and started doing a lot of shows with John, doing bar gigs here and there, and ended up doing, eventually got to the need where John and I were both doing, 2 or 3 gigs simultaneously. And so there was a need for sound, and I started picking up, a few tricks here and there from Johnny and some other friends I ended up doing shows with over the years, and eventually ended up starting to work at some of the local clubs doing sound there. I was pretty heavily working at the Montage Music Hall in Rochester for a while. And that's basically how I got into doing sound, just from doing lights and drums over the years. So
trial by fire. And I can't tell you how many gigs I get a panicked call from Steve and would be like, because I mixed at the Montage too for a little bit before I got sick of the promoter and quit. But like, I would get calls and texts from Steve while I was at my day job. I'd be like helping him fix his rig over the phone. Like,
yeah, it was a mess. But I think the best part about that was because it was such a mess. Basically learned trial and error. By jumping in the deep end, and I learned a lot really fast. So
that little dive club, cheesy as it was a great place for Steve in particular, because the gear was awful, the room was awful, and 90% of the bands were awful. But then you would get the occasional national coming through there. So like, you do a battle of the bands for like 9 awful local bands and 1 moderately good one, and then a couple college age bands come through, and they're not totally terrible, but they're really stoned. And then you get Clutch.
Yeah.
Or Overkill. Like serious heavy duty acts coming through, and like, having to deal with
it seemed to be like Friday nights would be, local night, basically borderline karaoke style, and then it turned into, the next night you had to have like bands like Thursday and Clutch and these giant, bigger national acts coming in with tour buses, and
I think
you really got to learn and on your toes when you're with those guys, because the biggest part, the hardest thing I had to learn was that it's not what you know, it's what you can prove to other people that you think you know what you're doing. That goes a long way, is if you can prove to the guys that, you kind of know what you're doing, that kind of helps a lot. Confidence goes a long way, even if you have no idea what you're talking about.
Totally. All right. I think the first thing I want to go into, I'm going to kind of, since we got Steve on the hook here already, just in case something goes wrong with our video connection. So one of the more interesting things to me, because I don't know a ton about drums, like despite growing up with a best friend who was a drummer and teching his kits and having mic'd and set up all kinds of kits throughout my career, like my approach to drums is, okay, like play them. Let me hear how they sound, and then I'm going to go out in the house. I want to make them sound as much like that as I can, unless you tell me to make them sound like something else. And, you know, my same philosophy went for the record. So, like, you know, I pretty much treated drums the same way I treat guitar players. Like, all right, dude, this is your piece. This is your axe. I'm just going to assume that you have it sounding the way you want it to sound. And, yeah, little side note. Like, I've always loved it when, like, on the same stage in the same night, you get some kid where, like, his mom and his dad both help him load in the Neil Peart Jr. Chromatic Tom kit and polish it for him. And, like, you know, he sits down. And he's like, oh, no, don't touch it. Don't let your microphones touch it. You're gonna mess it all up. And, you know, like, so he plays, and he's like, meh. And then the next kid comes in with, like, a drum kit that he got at 2 separate garage sales. And, like, it's 3 different colors, and everything's cracked and falling apart. And he sounds like Dave Lombardo from Slayer, like just blows it up. So it just goes to show you that, you know, like we say all the time, it's not your gear, it's how you use it. But anyway, I'm making this a long. I've been listening to Dave Pensado too much. We like ask a question for 8 minutes without actually saying anything, and then turn it over to the guest. So, what do you think, Steve?
What do you want to know?
Good answer. Good answer. The thing that's been coming up lately is Anthony knows a lot about this kind of stuff, but we just haven't ever gotten too deep into it. But like being a drum builder yourself, I just want to have you talk a little bit about like what, starting with maybe different kinds of woods and how they, you know, how they, sounds like I got an email, how they like give you different types of sounds and projections and resonances and things. And like, if you want to move from there into different hardware setups, just kind of go on about that a little bit and we'll see what pops up.
Okay. A little quick background. I forgot to mention before, but yeah, I've been building custom drums for since about right around 2000, so a little over 10 years now. I started, you know, a little entrepreneurship of trying to build custom drums. Started off with a snare drum. I basically found a website where you could buy all these cool custom parts that you can't find in the stores, and you know, I started to realize that you could, you know, put these together, and actually, you know, did a lot of research and learned a lot, and ended up building my first snare drum, which was nothing more than a 13 by 3.5 piccolo snare drum. You know, the thing cost me like $200 to build, and it was, you know, nice thing. And I ended up, you know, using, I think I used a, what is it, very thin, like a 6-ply shell. Had these double-sided lugs and used 2.3 millimeter hoops on it, and the thing sounded amazing. I ended up using it at a lot of shows. Sure, I know Johnny with it because I'm sure, you know, he doesn't. He's not a big fan of piccolo snare drums, that's for sure.
It was like a pork pie junior.
It was a pork pie junior. It was actually, you know, right before pork pie started taking off, and everybody and their brother has those now. So,
they all sound the same.
I guess a couple things. If you're really getting into drums, the thinner the shell, it tends to, on toms, you kind of get a little more resonance out of them, a little more bottom end. And the thicker you go with the shell, you end up getting a little more attack. I like on my toms, on my personal kit, I like to go with like a 6-ply shell. And whether it's smaller drums or bigger drums, you get a nice low end out of them.
And what would be a thick shell? Like how many plies would that be?
On like a toms, you can go up to probably 10 to, you know, anything more than 10, you're kind of going to get too much attack out of it. And you're kind of looking for more of that deep sound out of it. I don't know.
All right, well, let's go into wood species a little bit. I'll name a couple that I can think of, and you guys chime in if I forget any. But you hear talk about maple kits all the time. What would you expect from a maple shell?
You know, it's one of those things where you talk to different drummers. I'm one of those firm believers that, you know, a drum is a drum. There's different types of woods. We'll make a little bit different sounds. You know, a harder wood is going to give you a little more, a little more attack, and a little more, you know, if you use a softer wood like a soft maple, you're going to get, you know, different types of overtones, but to the average person, I honestly don't believe, you can tune any type of wood kit to sound like another wood kit, in my opinion.
So if you're talking about the difference between a birch kit or a maple kit or whatever, it's like guitar players splitting hairs about stuff.
Yeah, you're talking about precious tone molecules that, you're going to hear. Yeah, I had to throw that in there.
That's beautiful. I don't think we've actually brought that up on the podcast before.
Yeah. So, you're going to get, I honestly think with different types of wood, you're going to get a little different, especially with snare drums. With a thicker ply shell, you're going to hear a little bit of difference. But once you get into like acrylics and metals, that's when you hear the big difference. There are different sounds, and you can get different characteristics. But really, the biggest difference is going to be the thickness of the shell. Is going to make a huge difference. The type of heads you use are definitely going to make the most difference, the most impact on, the type of sound you're looking for. And believe it or not, but the actual type of hoops that you're using makes a huge difference too. If you're going with a wood hoop, is going to give you kind of a warmer sound with less attack because you can't crank them up as high as like different types of metal hoops. A die cast hoop is going to be, is going to give you a lot more attack. And it's going to give you a lot of ring to it versus a normal 2.3 millimeter hoop is going to give you a little more overtone, a little open sound. So that's where you're going to hear the biggest difference, I think, in my opinion. But, you're going to talk to different people and they're going to give you, 3 different answers. So
Brandon's chomping at the bit to give his own. I actually go ahead.
Sure he is.
I just I just recently got a DW kit, and before that I had a Gretsch kit. They're both maple. They're incredibly different sounds. Anth knows because he recorded both.
I like the Gretsch better.
I
don't care that it costs a quarter of as much as the DW, but
I ended up getting the DW because, like I said, Pro Audio Consulting is a very small company, and we use it for backline. So I kind of half own it with the company. I own the shells, and they own the hardware and cymbals. I couldn't ever rent my Gretsch kit. It was never on a rider, but the DW's on a rider. What I miss, I think, the most, and he made me think about it, the die-cast hoops on those Gretsch toms, it was a renowned maple kit, so it wasn't a USA maple, but it was one step down. It's all made in China, but man, those things were beautiful. And the DW that I have, just like,
sounds like a DW.
Yeah, it sounds just like a DW. They all sound basically the same, and I think that's why a lot of guys put them on riders, because they know what they're going to get when they show up.
It's like the NS10s of the drum world.
You know where
you sit. Might not be the best, but you know right where you're at.
The Ampeg 810, it's in every rider ever, and there's a reason for it. I mean, it's good gear. You're going to show up and you're going to have a set of drums that you can use. You can make sound good with tuning. And I get that. But I am one, and it sounds like Steve is too. I'm one to have character in my instrument, and DW just doesn't really have that character. It sounds like a DW, and the Gretsch just had that special
that kick drum.
Oh, and the toms, all of it, the whole thing. I got to say though, I do love this DW snare drum, and I'm going to keep that once I sell this kit because I love it. But
all right, now I'm gonna hold this thing up because we need tone molecules to be a larger part of our organization here. Now I'm gonna try and tell the story really quickly and hopefully without offending Dave because I think he knows where I live, and he's the type to hide out in your bushes. But Steve and I were doing these gigs where a nonprofit organization would bring a band into schools. We were their techs. And this band who, let's let him remain nameless for the time being until I can actually talk to the fellow I'm about to mock. In love. It's in love. There was this guitar player, we'll call him Dave, who he had such a rig. I mean, this cabinet, this vintage head, that vintage head switchers, impedance matchers. And that was before he even got into the sampler, which was also part of his responsibility. Now, the other guitar player in the band had a matchless Super Chief that had been modded so it was just a head, and he played that through a 1960 slant face cabinet, like flip that sucker out of standby, rock and roll came out. Every day, matchless, you're a tough match. That was all he'd say. Meanwhile, Dave's on the other side of the stage for 45 minutes toning out his rig, And he would walk in saying things like, yes, I switched, and he didn't really sound like this. I'm totally mocking him openly. Oh, yes, I switched to these custom hand-soldered Mogami cables soldered by blind monks in the mountains of Japan because they preserve more of my precious tone molecules. And, like...
This really happened, by the way.
He didn't actually say tone molecules was my term, mocking him over the Mogami cable incident. But then, like, he never said this either, but, like, Steve came up with this thing, like, okay, he'd strike a chord. It would go out in the auditorium and be like, all right, guys, is it better with my hair like this or like this? And we put up with it because he was really splitting hairs between, like, it being the 99.5th percentile of awesome guitar tone or the 99.6th percentile. Like, he was just, his playing and his tone were some of the best I've ever had the pleasure to work with. So it was totally worth putting up with all his crap.
It was amazing. He would be in one of my probably top 10 best sounding guitar rigs
of anybody. Like put him up against Jerry Cantrell, and I would vote him. He would still be near the top of the list. Like anybody you can think of guitar wise. Dave, you're up there. We love you, buddy. If you're listening. All right.
He's listening from the bushes in front of your house right now.
His ears started burning, and he hustled over here from Niagara Falls.
I get a call from him tonight.
We'll all be sleeping in undisclosed locations. But anyway, to get back to drums, something interesting Steve told me about drums was like something that's sort of between like the new and the vintage sound was the shape of the profile of the edge of the rim where the head actually goes on.
The bearing edge.
Yeah,
the
I
bearing
was just
edge.
going to say that.
Yes, talk to me about bearing edge a little bit, and then let's get into heads.
Okay, bearing edge is the actual, on the edge of the shell is the angle of, and the point of contact, or where the head actually makes contact with the shell. Now, with a 6-ply or a 10 or even a 20-ply shell, that's the thickness. A ply of a shell, you're only talking is like what, maybe a millimeter or two at max, if that. And really, what you do is the most generic bearing edge out there is a double 45. That's what you're going to see on probably 95% of the kits.
So that's a point like the peak of a house. Like
pretty much like a roof of a house. It's just a straight 45-degree angle on both sides. They have different variations between like a 15, 45, and then there's a round over. Back in the the early days in the 30s and the 50s, they did mostly a 30 or 60-degree round over. That gives you a kind of a warmer, open sound back, like those early 30s drums, like you heard back with like the the Max Roach type of sound, the Buddy Rich, those type of sounds with that open sound. In the like 80s and 90s is when you start hearing the double 45-degree type of sound where you have that really sharp, distinct attack sound. So you can change the type of the pitch of the drum basically by the different types of bearing edges you can choose. And there's I've seen probably about 10 different designs, and everybody's got their own opinion on which one sounds better, but the industry standard's pretty much a 45 degree right now.
So that's less contact with the head, and you get more of that modern resonant sound.
Mm-hmm. Yep, less contact, and
Do you have something, B?
Yeah, I have an old Slingland snare drum that's got the old round over on it. I don't know if it's 30 or 60. It's probably a 60, but it really does make a huge difference. I've got Anth has seen this one. I've got a 70s Ludwig marching snare drum. So it's 14 inches deep. It's 14 inches round. And I converted it to be a kit snare drum.
And even with half a roll of gaff tape, you can't get the ring out of that sucker.
Not at all. And it's a 13-ply maple shell. And the thing's brutal. It's crazy loud. I vented it too, and it's just crazy loud. And that has a sharp 45-degree bearing edge on it, and you can really tell. You can definitely tell.
Let's actually. Well, I'll just add the one little bit that I know about bearing edges is if you're fitting up a kit and you're having trouble either getting or keeping a kit in tune. Sometimes if the shell gets a little warped, there's a trick where you take the head off, you set it down on a surface that is perfectly flat, like a good flat countertop or a concrete floor that or a piece of glass actually would be about the best thing. and you set a flashlight down or a light bulb inside of that thing, and if you can see light escaping anywhere, you need to do a little bit of sanding and get that thing, get that bevel or that point, wherever it is, making it so it's making really good, even contact all the way around the head.
Yeah, some of the guys use beeswax, I think, to kind of fake that contact, to kind of try to rework the edge a little bit, as a temporary situation, I guess.
Uh-huh.
I've seen a few older drums with some beeswax on the bearing edge.
Or you could just throw it away.
All right. The thing I wanted to get into next, since that's the discussion seems to be pointing there, is heads and the type of head and how that affects the sound. Why don't we start? We'll just kind of go around the circle because I'm sure all three of you guys have an opinion. And let's start and just say, we'll do snare and then top head and bottom head for toms, and then kick. Well, why don't we do kick, snare, and toms in that order? Anything that you feel is important to that, and you can, if you want to give a brand and a model number or just a type of head that you like the best for that, we'll go around the circle, and then if there's anything that didn't get mentioned, we'll bring up those, brands or types or models or whatever. So why don't you lead off, Steve? Start with kick drum, beater head.
I am usually an Evans guy, straight up and down.
I think everybody here is.
For the last probably 2-3 years, I have been going with just on my kick drum, the Aquarian Super Kick 2. That is turning into the industry standard right now. That the Evans makes, I think they call it the EMAD, with the internal foam type of ring.
Yep.
It's a nice little kick drum head, but I've seen just about every one of them, the foam either comes out of them or, it sounds okay in the beginning, but they tend to lose their, they don't tend to keep the sound. Right now, I swear by that Aquarian 2 Super Kick.
Yeah, you said Super Kick 2 and all the hands went up on this end. So what do you like on the resonant head of the kick drum?
On the resonant head, depending on the sound I'm going for, like what type of band I'm playing with, if I want kind of a more boomy sound, Aquarian's got, I can't remember the name of the head. They've got one that's got a foam lining circle on the inside. When I had that combination of the Super Kick 2 and that head, I didn't have any muting whatsoever in the kick drum. And
was that your orange kit?
That was the orange kit back in the day.
Yeah, that was what Steve had me sit down one night at that after we sound checked it, and I sat down and played it, and actually the mics were muted, and I started playing, and I was shocked when I was sitting behind the kit. It just sounded done. It was there. I didn't need to do anything to it. And then he got to go out in the house and hear it. That's still one of the best kick drums I've ever had the pleasure of mixing.
Yeah, and then if I want to go for something with the more, if you're looking for, you can do just a regular resonant head, a black head on the front, with just a little muting on it. If you want to get a little bit more of that wet sound and a little bit more of that slap, you can use that type of head too. So I guess it goes for if you're looking for something punchy or looking for something more meaty, a little low end, you want to use a little bit more muting on it. But if you want something, if you're going for that Buddy Rich sound with that, floppy bass drum head, you can go with that type of.
I was going to ask you about tension on the front head because I know that's a big question a lot of times.
For me, I usually like to go. I will tighten it by hand. As far as I can get it, and then I'll go about 1, maybe 2 turns on the key, just to tune it up just enough.
So it's just as soon as it grabs tension, just a little bit further than that?
Pretty much. If that's to give you that nice wet sound. And if you're going for something nice and punchy, I might tune it up, a few more notches here and there. But the front head usually isn't tuned too tight.
All right, cool.
The back head too is kind of the same way. You usually just get it tight enough. All
right, let's stay on kick drums a minute. We'll go over to Brandon.
This is always a tricky question because it totally depends on what I'm playing and what I'm trying to go for as far as sound. Right now on the DW, I found the Evans EQ4 has been my favorite, and it was on the Gretsch kit as well. Yeah. It's actually a single ply with a bit of a damping ring around the edge. That's on the beater side. It tends to have a bit more punch, and it's a little more open than like a Super Kick 2. Bless you.
Thanks.
On the resonance side, I've there's a Remo on there now. It's whatever came on it.
with the DW logo on it. So I think it's like a...
The dude just like put a DW vinyl on it just so it looked like a DW. I don't really care. See, typically resonant heads for me, as long as it's tunable, I can make it work. I prefer to have a little bit of damping on the head. He mentioned the EMAD. I've got a funny story about that while we're still on it. I had an old, actually it was an early 90s Ludwig kit. Sounded fantastic. It was gorgeous and perfect shape. And I had an EMAD on it. It was a 20-inch kick drum. Did an entire studio session. Engineer called me and said, "Hey man, what's up with your kick drum head?" And I was like, "What?" So I went over to the studio. It was close. He played it back for me, and you could hear the foam slapping on the head.
Oh.
The entire thing. There was nothing we could do. It was over. It was done.
I actually had that problem once too. I actually took a little piece of gaff tape and taped it down.
I wish I would have known.
That was my trick.
Yeah, I wish I would have known, honestly. And I've got a cool kick drum tuning trick too. I learned this from a video that the drum tech for John Bonham released a while back. To get a kick drum or a big floor tom to its lowest tuning position, you, like he said, you do it. You go finger tight on all the tension rods, and then it's a cool trick. You flip it so you can see it in the light, so you can see a light reflecting off of it, and you put a small amount of pressure in the center of the head with either your fist or with a couple of fingers, and you see it wrinkle. And you can start on one lug and get all the wrinkles out all the way around, and that's the lowest tuning point of a floor tom or a kick drum. It works. It's never failed me as far as lowest tuning point. It works
like the lowest resonant point,
right?
Where it's really making the magic.
Because you could always make it thwacky without it, you know. But if I want like a nice deep rock, you know, kick drum tone, that's what I'll do. I typically, just for my own style, I like to tune it up a little higher, probably into the medium tuning range. It's certainly no jazz kick drum. And for those of you who don't know, jazz kick drums sound like another tom.
It's a floor tom with a kick pedal on it.
And tuned up high.
Yeah.
It's a high tuned floor tom. But I prefer like a kind of a funkier sound to my kick drum, like a Tower of Power, Dave Garibaldi kind of thing. And that's what I end up going for.
Something that gets you in the chest rather than making your pants flap.
Yeah. And with the right kind of miking, you can do both.
I pretty much ended up with the same stuff as Brandon because he leaves his kit at my place most of the time. So, it depends on the drummer, because at the church I'm at, we have a couple different drummers. One guy that was orchestra trained, so he doesn't play really heavy. He's got a very light kick, so the EQ4 is great for him. I've got a birch kit down there, so it's a lot warmer. There's not as much attack in it as like a maple kick. But his foot, you'd swear he was just kind of maybe touching it a little bit. So I used to have a Super Kick 2 on there, and I played with an EMAD, and it sounded like balls. Like, it sounded bad. There was no definition.
What do balls sound like?
You want to come by on Sunday? I can swap out the head for you. But with the, he's one of those guys that'll sit down and play anything. He's not the greatest drummer in the world, but working at a church, you find out people that are committed are awesome. Like the guys that'll show up every week, and he's done that. He's played, he's been playing drums as long as I know him. He's there every week. He's just, he beats the piss out of a snare drum because he played marching snare for so long. So, he nails the snare, he'll beat on the toms, but the kick drum is just real weak. So, with, I want the kick drum to cut through a little bit. I want to hear some attack on it. So, putting a Super Kick 2 or an EMAD on there didn't do that. But I also have other drummers with master's degrees in drum performance that'll kick through a concrete wall and then finish eating their sandwich. There's one guy who has his I think it was Temple that he got his master's degree in drum performance from, has wasted 2 Super Kicks and 2 EMADs on me, new ones, just busted right through. So now I have to it's the Ryan proof drum kit. I keep 2 extra kick heads, 2 extra snare heads, and an extra cymbal in there just in case.
Don't let him break my 19.
No, I've got one of those too.
Good.
I think he already. That's why the first one's broken.
Right. So before we're not gonna have to, we got to get to like snares and toms, and we're we have to do a second drum show, and who knows if the stars will all align to ever make that happen. Last question on kicks, though, and this is just like quick yes or no. Does anybody ever take their front head off for recording?
Depends on the session.
So you have, Steve?
Sure.
I'm not a fan of it, but I've seen it done 100 times, so it's personal preference on if you know how to really tune a kit or not.
Yeah.
I think it depends on the drum. A little like the style too. I've done it once, but the birch kit didn't really work well for that. Like on the birch kit that I've got, at least, like you need the front head there to make it a complete sound.
What would you do it for? Anybody?
We've been thinking about doing it with Brandon's kit, his DW.
Just to try it, maybe.
And then build a tunnel around it, maybe.
Yeah, maybe just.
So it's for like kind of a mellow rock.
Yeah, I don't even know if I would do it for rock. More like if you wanted to sound like a 70s funk band, or if you wanted that kind of like 60s 70s retro kind of tone. That's what they did back then. They didn't even normally put front heads on the kits
with no holes in them.
But they had nothing. I mean, it was just an open shell. Same with the toms. They didn't have any bottom heads on the toms. And if you're looking for that, fine. I mean, whatever the sound's there for. It's not my personal preference to do that. I definitely like the sound of kick drum with a head on the front. But if I need that tone, then sure.
If you're going for all attack and more of a thuddy sound and no body whatsoever, to me it sounds like playing a cardboard box. But if you're going for that sound, that's the way to do it.
Cool. All right. Well, let's get into snares here. Well, we still got some time left. Let's talk about the top and bottom snare heads. Like, Steve, what's your favorite pick for those?
I used to swear by the Evans G2 until I was introduced to the G2 is a 2-ply head, and I liked that when I was growing up because it was durable and it had a nice body to it, and you can it had really good sound to it, but it had some limitations, and when you'd crank it up to get a nice high pitch out of it, it would give you a lot of ring and wouldn't be very forgiving. I ended up getting introduced to the Power Center, which is it's an Evans, it's a 1-ply head with the patch in the center of it.
Is it the reverse one?
I looked at that thing and I didn't think I'd like it at all. And turns out, I swear by that head right now. It is basically one of the most durable heads I've ever played in my life. And because it's a 1-ply, it's really, really sensitive. Mm-hmm. So you can get, that very, every ghost note that you play is going to be picked up by it. And for a bottom head, if they do make a coated 300, but I usually go with the Hazy 300, the Evans Hazy 300. The clear, I think it's I forget if it's like a 4 or a 6 millimeter head. But it's
a 3.
Industry standard.
3
mil, yeah.
So go ahead.
I've shifted to a million different snare heads, and sometimes it has to do with the drum, and sometimes it has to do with what I'm trying to get out of it. Heads for me are so tricky because a lot of times I just play what's on the drum until it dies, and then I go to the local drum shop and pick up what sounds cool. Right now I'm using an ST dry, right?
HD dry.
HD dry?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the Evans. It's a single ply head, but it's got little holes poked in it all around. If you haven't seen that,
I got that one on mine.
Yeah, and it's great. I prefer a higher tension on the snare head on the top. Mm-hmm. So
do you cover up some of the holes? Because Anthony, when he was putting them on with me, he showed me you cover any 2 of them and it just sounds better.
I actually haven't played with that. I don't know.
I think I did it on your snare when you weren't around. I just put a little strip of spike tape on 2 of the holes on one side and 2 on the other.
I've actually never tried playing with the holes.
Tone molecules.
It's precious. If you let out too many tone molecules,
I tend to tune up high. So like he said, if you tune up high, you'll end up with a lot of ring. This head really calms down the ring for me. Although I do like to be able to have that ring at my disposal if I want. If I play near the edge of the head, it gives me that ring, and I like that. As far as the bottom head goes, I always try and get the thinnest thing I can find, knowing that, yes, I will probably break it.
Like in the middle of that Ellicottville show.
Yeah, right in the middle of the show. The second song into the show that John mixed last summer, I was like, man, this doesn't sound right. And I looked down, I thought I'd busted the top head because it actually messed with the tension.
Yeah.
And I looked down and the thing was fine, and I reached my hand underneath and busted right through the bottom head, which honestly is the first time I've played
Bizarre.
hundreds and hundreds of shows, and I've never done that until Ellicottville Fall Fest.
I've actually broken more bottom heads than top heads.
Yeah, it's crazy, right?
Weird.
I break them all the time.
They're so thin. 3 mil is nothing.
It's a trash bag.
Yeah, basically. Yeah.
My buddy Peter played a show at a canal series out here, and they were opening for Collective Soul. And the first song, Peter played like a 7.5 or an 8-inch deep Black Beauty. For the end of the first song, busted through the top head. He's looking around. He's like, "Oh man, I didn't bring any other snares." Looking around, climbs through the back line, steals Collective Soul snare drum, and then on the end of the last song, busted their head too, and then put it back. We got kicked out.
I was going to say, I'm surprised you didn't get tackled.
We got thrown out. They took our VIP backstage passes. They told us we couldn't come back there anymore.
And that same drummer, Peter, is persona non grata on the entire continent of Australia. He's not allowed to go there anymore.
Yeah, he's the only person I know that's been kicked out of an entire continent.
Wow.
It's another good story.
But anyways, for me, for snare drum heads, for a while, I was all about getting the most I could get out of a snare drum head for like the longest, because my church, until I finally kind of showed them the difference. Like, they're like, "Well, you only buy drum heads once a year, right?" I was like, "Nah, not really, no." So it was like, "Well, what's going to last the longest?" And I bought an Emperor X. And that thing sounded sick on like the 7-inch deep, superphonic snare that I've got. Like, there's so much beef to that snare with that head, but on everything else, or at least now, I've just switched to just the plain coated G1 on everything. It sounds really good. They're pretty easy to tune.
If you can, if durability isn't the issue,
No,
and ring, you can always do the wallet trick or gaff tape.
Yeah, like there's that little like flapping piece of gaff tape that you showed me.
Yeah.
And I do that a lot, but that superphonic sounds unbelievable. And then I think on a couple snares I did the Remo power center, whatever it is, or the controlled sound. So it's like an ambassador head with a little reverse dot on it, but mostly just a plain G1 and a hazy 300 for the backside, and blasters on everything.
You love those things,
I do.
man. There's like pure sound blasters everywhere.
What, Steve?
I swear by the blasters. They're the best snare you can buy.
That after I saw the guy from Tool used them, I was like, all right, cool.
Yeah,
that's it for me.
He also uses solid brass shell drums.
700-pound drum kit cast out of old cymbals. Yeah. That's how you get a drum set not stolen.
Yeah, because they just literally
the poor
can't
schmo can't steal it.
Spine injury. All right, well, let's move into toms. And the only thing I'm going to say on the subject of toms is, I remember when I was teching drums for my friend back in the 90s, he had a Pearl Export, and I forget if it came with or if he put them right on, but he had hydraulic heads on there, which was a 2-ply with oil in between. I think mostly because it looked cool. Like, it was kind of psychedelic, and when the front man was being a dork, you could kind of like poke it with your finger and trace little.
I was going to wait, but I can't wait. I use hydraulics. I'm not kidding. I use them. I used them on the Gretsch kit. They sounded absolutely incredible. Here's the only issue with hydraulics. If you play your kit live without miking, don't use hydraulics. It doesn't sound good. If you mic the toms individually, or I guess even with an overhead mic, if you mic them, they sound fantastic mic'd. They don't sound good by themselves. It's kind of a weird reversal, because coming from live engineers and studio engineers that we are, the first rule is, record something that sounds good already, and then it'll sound good. But hydraulics, like they sound like they're mic'd without being mic'd. So I'll leave it there. Although they've changed. The ones that you're talking about, they made like blue ones.
They still make the blue and I think the
black
and the clear.
Yeah. Those, it was a totally different makeup. I remember them. I don't remember hearing them because it was such a long time ago. They've changed the line, and they're actually a really fantastic head, and they'll last forever.
So there you go. For the working musician who's playing a mic'd kit. That's the stuff.
And your sound guy will love you. I did it because I was mic'd every show.
Well, and I loved him when I was a budding sound guy. I was like, this is the greatest kit ever. Like, I've heard all these, guys with vintage Ludwigs and big fancy Tamas because, Lars Ulrich was the Big Balls drummer, king of the world at the time. And, like, my little buddy's entry-level Pearl export with hydraulic heads just sounded good to me week in, week out.
People make fun of them. They still do. And the way you brought it up, it's like, hydraulics.
I make fun of them.
Yeah. And
I record you all the time.
I would get crooked looks every time I brought him into a gig. But I'll tell you what, as soon as they put a mic on him and they heard him through the PA, they're like, oh, all right, never mind.
That's right. Sit down, sound man.
Yeah. And I got the pleasure, I got the privilege to work at Guitar Center. When I lived in San Francisco. The cool thing about that is I got stuff so cheap that I could try every combination of head and stick and cymbal, anything you can imagine. And luckily that's where that came from. I was a working musician and working at Guitar Center at the same time. And that's where the hydraulics came from. I just got lucky enough to be able to try them for super wicked cheap.
Nice. All right, Steve, I hear you trying to pipe up over there. What do you got for us?
I've never had much luck with the hydraulic heads. To me, they were always kind of hard to tune in that range that I liked. But I do agree with you on that statement that they do sound good mic'd up, but they sound terrible live.
Yeah, no joke.
But I swear by right now, I used to go with the G2 coated heads. That was my favorite. Kind of grew up with that, give you that nice warm sound. But I've switched over to Evans recently, about a couple of years ago. Decided to rip off Remo's pinstripes. They have these EC2 now. Yeah. They are pretty much the best head, and I think they're going to be the new industry standard right now.
They already are. Yeah, everyone has them.
They sound amazing. They're very easy to tune. You got to use very little, muting or gaff tape or whatever on them, and they last forever and they stay in tune.
Mine have been played 3 days a week for a year, and they still sound good.
Yeah, I played his kit 3 weeks ago, and the thing, I couldn't believe it. They were beat.
Yeah,
but
they're a year
honestly,
old plus.
Yeah, honestly, they still sounded fine. I mean, really, it was just a little bit of tweak, and they sounded great.
They sound amazing, and they stay in tune.
Yeah, no doubt.
They're worth the extra $2-3 a head. But
totally agree. I got this an interesting thing about my kit being used for backline is that guys always request certain heads. Which is cool for me because I don't really know much about this DW kit as far as head combinations go. The guy last week that had the kit wanted Aquarians. And it's cool because they put them on, play them for an hour, and then they're still brand new, and I still have all these brand new heads for my kit. But he had, what are those things? They're Aquarian.
Pro 2s?
Something 2.
Studio Pros, probably.
What's that?
The ones with the black edge on them?
No, not the Studio X's.
Studio X's.
These are like the Force 2.
Oh, Super 2s.
Super 2s, yeah. It's just a 2-ply coated head. I'm not in love with them. They're okay. We recorded last Sunday, and they sounded great in the mix, but then by themselves, I wasn't terribly pleased. They sound a little papery almost.
Yeah, I don't know if there's like no juice in between them, because usually all the other 2-plies, there's something.
Yeah, there's oil in between the heads.
Yeah, what I liked about them is that, like, recording you with the hydraulics for such a long time, I got used to the more dead fat sound. But for like close miking, the hydraulics sounded good. But for the room mics and the overheads and stuff, the Aquarian sounded way better. Like you could hear the tone of the tom other than just a twack.
Yeah, I mean, I got to give that to DW. On a total sidetrack, is I finally tuned up last week for this session. And man, those toms, the notes are so clean.
Tuned them to pitch, like the pitch they stamp on the inside of those suckers.
I didn't even do that because the 10-inch wouldn't have worked there. It was way too high or too low.
That's why I took it off the kit when I used it.
I gotta say the notes are so true, and it's. I loved my Gretsch toms, and they just sang real well, but. Man, I've never had toms that just have such a true note in the recording.
Well, I'm glad you went there because we're getting close on time here. Of course, we're going to run over because this is going great. The bottom head tuning was the next place I wanted to go, and whether you're tuning toms to a note, and obviously, like the answer depends on the song, depends on the band, depends on the kit.
The whole juju of getting rope, hanging it, and hitting it with a rubber mallet and seeing where it resonates. And I've heard some weird crap.
Let's start with Steve again. What are your thoughts on tuning a bottom head on a tom?
My chick with the bottom head, and you got the option of using a coated head on the bottom. I've seen a couple people do that, or that'll give you a little bit more warmer sound and a little less overtone, a little less ring. But my favorites are using Evans makes a resonant head, which is basically just a really thin head. It's probably just a little bit thicker than a snare bottom head. But the same trick of the bass drum is I will just basically tune it. I'll thread it by hand as far as I can go, and I will just tune it so that all the wrinkles are out of it, and maybe go a half a turn more just to get that certain tone that I'm looking for. But that's about it. It'll be just barely. It's supposed to be resonant. It's not supposed to be a high pitched sound. If you're going for that really beach ball kind of sound, you can crank them up. But that's my trick, is just to barely tune them up. I see you laughing, so I know exactly where you're going.
I'm gonna clue in our audience. I used to have D112s only for my kick drum mics, and I was a big metalhead. So we were mixing some Christian rock band at some church. I guess it was in a school, but it was a church event. And I was really proud of my kick drum sound that I dialed up that night. And I turned over to my friend Steve, the drummer man, running my lights, and I'm like, "How you like that kick drum, man?" He's like, "I don't know what the F is wrong with you. Your kick drums always sound like a freaking beach ball." And that was one of the best moments of education for me ever, and I have Steve to thank for that.
Ever since then, you've really come along.
You got rid of the D112 first. I'm sure that helped.
And I still got him because I still do metal shows once in a while.
Yeah.
And now we know from the recent video podcast how to use it and make it sound good.
True. Yeah, our little
Thanks,
demo
Anth.
there.
Yeah.
All right. So what do you guys think about bottom heads?
I'm just like him. I use something real thin whenever possible. This is, of course, for my own personal preference. If I'm doing some crazy gig where I need something different, then I will. But I tend to tune it the same tone as the top head. So I'll tune the top head to a note by muting the bottom head with my hand, tapping it with a drumstick, drum key, whatever, what have you, tuning it to the around the pitch that I'd like, and then I tune the bottom head the same way until they're the same tone, as close as I can get it. The floor tom gets a little tricky sometimes because I like them real fat and open. Typically, again, same drum tuning video from before, John Bonham's drum tech. Apparently Bonham used to tune, he used to tune Bonham's kit in fourths. So the bottom head would be a fourth higher than the top head.
Really?
And I've tried that a bunch on floor toms.
It doesn't work.
I've really only had it work on floor toms. I can't get it to work on rack toms. But then again, he used, what was it, 14, 16, 18 toms. So he really only used floor toms, which is probably why it worked for that. But I like to tune it to pitch, and I like to tune each drum individually. So I do fourths in between drums. So floor tom to the second tom to the first tom, or if there's four, that way.
Right. And you're tuning the two heads pretty close to each other, so that,
Yep,
and then you can control the resonance by how much you detune the bottom head.
Yeah, I typically if I want to control resonance, I'll tape it.
Oh, okay.
I like to have the same pitch. It's just the way I've always done it. I guess I haven't really played that much with it in the last 10 years. So.
Speaking of tape real quick, what was the flapping gaff tape trick that Anthony brought up?
We were having the roughest time in the world with this. I've got a Pearl.
It's a free floater.
Yeah, it's a free floating. I can't remember the actual number, but it's the 6.5 one, and it's a maple shell, and when I got there, it was a great sounding snare. The drummer had just put on the heads before I started working at the church. It sounded good. And the first time I went to change it, I didn't understand the engineering side behind a free floating drum.
The lugs don't touch the drum, for those who don't know.
Yeah.
So there's little tubes that go around the drum, and basically the tension is.
You make a sandwich out of the front and back.
Right.
Head and,
Yep.
Yeah. And I could not get the ring out of this. Muted the bottom head, muted the top head. They're the same pitch, everything. Could not get the ring out of the sucker. So Brandon shows up one day. He's like, "Oh, try this," and takes a little square of gaff tape, folds it up, and then gets another piece of gaff tape, folds around it, and makes this kind of flap. So it's taped on the rim of the drum and folds over and folds around and sits on the top of the drum. So when you hit it, it pops up a little bit and then slaps back down. and it kills the ring, or at least most of the ring. Like you still
It's
get a
not
little
audible. You can't hear it hit the drum head,
Right.
even with a mic on.
and it's really helpful because there's still some ring characteristic of the drum, but it cuts a lot of it out.
What was that, Steve?
That's a new one. I've never heard that one.
Yeah,
the trick that I've always done is take a piece of gaff tape about 2 inches long and kind of like fold it into like a W shape and pinch the middle and then press that down onto the snare itself.
Right, so you get like a little T shape of gaff.
Like a T shape, upside down T, and that takes a lot of the ring out too without being too choking. And the nice thing about that is you can play with it. You can add more, take some away to get the sound you're looking for.
I tried doing that, and that didn't do it. But like a little, actually spike tape, just a half-inch slice of that with a T stuck on one side, and then somewhere not directly across from it on the other side, stuck that little tape flap thing, and that did it. I still actually have that on that snare drum.
You've got it on a couple others too. That's a Dave Garibaldi from Tower Power trick.
We'll have to see if we can get a picture of that. And you can snap one with your cell phone. I never post anything that I say I'm going to with the podcast, but maybe I'll actually get around to it this time. All right, well, we just hit the hour mark, and I know if we get started on cymbals, that's a whole nother can of worms, and we'll be here a long, long time. So that just means we're going to have to do another drum podcast next time we can get all four of these guys together.
Done.
So anyway, to wrap things up a little bit, I guess I didn't really know where
I
things
use G2s on the top and generic resonance on the bottom. All right, go on.
There you go. Same thing, same as everybody else. You're different like everybody else.
I'm special.
So I didn't really know how far we were going to get here. I mean, for all I know, it could have taken 10 minutes to talk about heads, and then we could have gone into cymbals, and then what you want to see as a drummer when you're going into a venue or a studio, and what you want to see as a venue or studio engineer when a drummer's coming in. So we'll get to all of that stuff the very next time we can get both of our drummers on the line. For future stuff coming up for the podcast, we've got a couple mini podcasts coming up. Anthony's working on a Glenn Johns.
Oh, yeah. Yep, I'm working on that.
You need help?
Yes. I need someone to play the kid that doesn't sound like a moron.
We're going to be in the studio shortly for my project coming up, and we're probably going to A/B Glenn Johns with XY overhead mics with pencil mics. So you might have to wait a little bit to get a Glenn Johns example. I've got a vocal EQ thing that I'm going to do a mini podcast on, and what else? That might be about it for mini podcasts. So if you're curious about, if you have some methodology or something,
how placing the chairs and the room accessories influences your sound in the studio,
and which way you comb your hair. Yeah. By the way, kids, tone molecules, precious tone molecules. I own the rights to that, so don't get excited thinking you're going to run off to Snork Tees and pull something.
He already did the old indie trick. He mailed it to himself.
Oh, one better than that. I have an actual copyright on that. So look at the Smart to Noise Ratio gear shop. Once we get it open, you can buy a precious tone molecule shirt.
Every time you say it, you owe John 10 cents.
And I don't know Dave anything. That's the beauty of it.
Sucker.
I'll give him a free one. But anyway,
a free tone molecule, or
I gave him.
He's got plenty of those.
I gave him every tone molecule I had to give and more. The exchange of tone molecules was complete when Dave and I left the venue. It sounds kind of dirty.
Yeah, it sounds bad.
Was that? Never mind.
I mean,
yeah, just stop, Anth. I see it in your face. Just
there are awful things happening.
I've seen
in my
a man
brain.
with a hotel towel around his waist, using a flat iron on his emo streaked hair. There's not much left.
He's not
unseen or
talking
unsaid
about
between-
me. He's not. No.
Not Anthony. No.
He's got the physique of Mr. Burns.
Mr. Burns, yeah, with a red streak in his bangs.
Yeah.
But we loved him. We still love him.
Still love him.
All right, so yeah, I'm actually going to draw things to a close here before things get going on too long. But do tune in. We haven't actually talked about when the next time Brandon's available. Although, look for this guy. He's going to try and join us as much as he's able for the podcast. He is also going to be documenting, philosophizing, and otherwise writing about the pseudo analog project that his band is working on. It's going to be in Pro Tools, but through an analog desk for pre's and using as many vintage analog plugins as they can muster.
And vintage analog pre's now that Anth has the hookup.
He sent out a group text this week that had
I sent out two.
An 1176 was one of them. It just said "BAM" underneath it.
An 1176 blue stripe with a Neve 2 1073 pre's in one box, and I sent out another one with two Chandler germanium pre-DIs and a TG2 something else, some other Chandler stuff. It's a whole rack of Chandler crap in one room. It's great.
Yeah. Anthony's been busy making friends with all the different studios in town, getting offered jobs. It's not going to be long before he hits the big time. So we're going to be hanging on.
I'm reaping the rewards.
We'll be hanging on. Yeah, Brandon gets to make a record with him, and hopefully I'll be hanging on to his coattails. He can farm out his dirty little jobs to guys like me.
Oh, you mean like the landscaping at church that I have to do to keep my health insurance?
Not with my back. Oy vey. But anyway, thanks everybody for tuning in. Thanks everybody from Reddit for listening, reading, keeping the hit counts high. We appreciate you swinging in. It lets us know we're giving you the stuff that you want. Get in touch. We're still not hearing from people too much. We are starting to see a few comments coming in. What's really nice though is when we put something on Reddit, we get a lot of commentary over there and see what people are thinking.
I'd like to see some of that. That's actually I knew John before I knew John.
Yeah.
From Reddit. I knew his screen name on Reddit. I couldn't believe it.
Yep. Well, we had met at the gig, but since then, in the ensuing year when we had not thought about each other at all, we were actually he knew me from Reddit, and it's funny because you can see us thinking with one mind because a post will come up and I'll comment on it and he'll be like, "Dang, snake me."
Yeah, he's too quick
coming over here to say, well, because my boss doesn't care if I'm on Reddit all day, so I check that shit once an hour. It's furthering my knowledge and research,
that's right. Absolutely,
and sharing the wealth.
That's how I play off watching Pensado's place
part
twice
of my ministry. Absolutely.
And
I'm required to stay up on all the latest stuff. All right. So yeah, but anyway, say that to say what I usually say. Don't be afraid of us. We're here. We're just a bunch of regular guys. We're jovial. Love to answer questions. Love to joke around with you. So if you want to just jump on Facebook or Twitter, get in touch with us. Direct message us on Reddit if you can find us. And if you're an old hand and you want to just trade war stories, we're down for that. If you're a noob starting out, you want to know what gear you should buy, ask somebody else. But if you have a technical question about signal routing, gain structure, or something cerebral like that, by all means. Actually, if you're a noob and you want to know what to buy, just scroll down, guys. It's right there. 18 of you a week come in and want to know what USB interface you should buy.
Really?
That information has been
there.
put forth.
It's there.
It's funny. The mods actually put a sticky up this week.
I saw that, which is good. They should.
Yeah.
It helps everybody.
It'll be interesting to see if there's anybody posting after that because I'm not sure there's been much else lately.
Yeah, I know.
But anyway, do check that out. If you are a listener only of the podcast and not yet a reader, find us at smart2noise.blogspot.com. You can search Smart to Noise on Facebook. Heck, you can Google us and we'll actually turn up on the first page.
Just going to say, did they just, for the sticky, just put the, here, let me Google that for you link on there?
I've done that a time or two when I'm feeling like not like being passive aggressively a jerk to somebody. But anyway, hit us up. We're here for you. And we'd love to have your ideas. If you want to contribute, if you're sick of correcting us for the incorrect things we say, well, we try not to. By all means, if you want to come and post and straighten it out, we'd love to have your posts, your thoughts. Like I say, Brandon, a buddy from around the way, he's your latest blog post creator. So be looking for stuff for him. And if Steve knew how to write, by all means, I would have him posting too.
He's a lighting guy. Leave him alone.
Steve and I have just had the classic, like, we really like each other, but people think we hate each other, relationship. Like, I'll be in the venue first, and like, oh, good, Sparky's here. And I'll go, what? Can't hear you. Like, would have put my lights here if the frickin' sound guy had, I wouldn't have hum in my system if the frickin' lighting guy had stayed home. So yeah, we absolutely have that relationship. It's totally fun to watch. You should come to one of our gigs sometime, if we ever get any again.
I know.
I think the live industry for us is pretty well imploded.
Pretty much lately, yeah.
But anyway, we really are actually going to draw this to a close right now, and don't know what we'd be bringing you next week. It might just be me and Anth sitting on a couch trying to keep the cats off the laptops, or maybe we'll be able to bring you part 2 of the drum podcast where we'll get into the microphone technical side of things.
My cats hate technology. Anything that you can plug into.
Apples. They love Macs. They want to touch.
It's because they're warm.
Could be.
Yeah.
He does always go for that top row of keys, like right over the battery.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Steve, we'll keep you on the line. We can keep shooting the breeze here for a minute after we sign off. But to our listening public, I'm going to cut it off before we go 10 full minutes over, and I totally blow my file size for the week. So thanks one and all for tuning in, listening in. Do get in touch, and we will see you next time. Thanks. Bye.